to day 13. Funny, I just checked my weight, and right, it's like heavier than when I started this. So it's like 2 months in or whatever. But I have to recognize, I did this, I started for, like, I used to do this machine pretty much every morning. Like, well, not every, like, for the last, these are the things you don't kind of realize and take into account. And I say, because this has been such a clearing process for so many different things. This is emotional, psychological, like the way I'm doing it. It's not just, here's your diet, here's a plan. Because I haven't been following that. Like, I want to be clear, like, that's not the way I've set this up for myself. Like, if people change little habits and little things, right, depending on where they started, they can get different results. But I'm trying to do something else for myself to understand myself and whatever else. And I say that because my body's gone through so many different shifts in this. And this goes back to way before I started this 2 months process. And that has to do with other things, but I was doing this, and that was really it. So for, 15 minutes a day, 4 or 5 days a week. Then it was like my body just completely has rejected it, didn't want to do it anymore, just stopped. I started, funny enough, literally almost at the start of this process, going, you need to try something else. Okay, shifting to this intermittent fasting, which you're saying, it's supposed to like reheal the body and this stuff, which I'm sure it is. And that's actually taking me in different ways. Why? Because you're restricted in a certain period of time, which changes the brain when you're restricted from something versus when you're not, versus when you're on something. That's kind of the psychology piece, versus not just like the repairing of different things, which I'm not going to get into too much, but the processing of my brain of where I've been at because of so many different things I've related. So I'm unconventionally study a lot of shit, right? And I say unconventionally because the way it comes to me and how I'm seeking things out is different, which I'm not going to get into right now. But if, for example, like chakras. So energies is actually what I'm kind of feeling, understanding what comes at me, why I feel that way. I go deeper into my thoughts. I understand the triggers that come around me. So filming something and actually getting it outside of you and talking, right, is a way of healing. It's a way of energy, but it also is a way of crashing when it go. So when you put something out there. So I have different platforms that I put out different things at different times, and depending on and where that is. So some people are more comfortable to share certain parts of their lives, not other comfortable. Or you're comfortable to share in this, in this particular way, with your friend, but not over here. No, okay. So that's what I say. What if everything was out there in your life? What if like everybody knew everything? Like, what are your deepest, darkest secrets? Basically, what if everybody knew everything? And I start there. Well, the funny thing is most people don't know what the core of their deepest, darkest secrets are. Actually, Dr. Jordan Peterson talks about something like you have to find your monster, your and know who that is. Most people wouldn't go deep enough to understand that. So as a person who has been abused in every way, I had to do that. I had to go, I'm like, what is my subconscious thoughts? Why do I self-sabotage? What is it? Is it really, it's a fear of myself, right? It's a fear of that monster, a fear of, because I'm such a people pleaser, and this is where this bipolar misunderstanding and tendencies can come from, is because I was, when you're sexually abused at a young age, psychologically abused through, like, that's manipulation, then your lack of self-worth, then you're bought things, then you're, made to believe your body's, for other people, right? Like you don't have that right to it. Then you're presented this, and then you're still in society having to keep something out. Like, holy shit, I didn't realize my life was such a mess. Because you don't actually, when I was first raped, became molested outside of my body. I was about 6 years old. And that's actually like a disassociative thing I had to realize. And because I didn't have a memory in my whole life until 2020, it's like I came back into my body and then I was getting all my memories back. And that's actually been part of this process, which is actually where this weight in my body and trying to understand it comes in. And I say this, what does that go back to? Unconventional things, energies and chakras, and everybody go, let me send, healing energies and different, what you need, and vibrations. Well, that actually is from like sound, what goes into our minds, which is why it's so important to understand what we're allowing into our head. So that's the people around us, the things we're saying, the information we're choosing to listen to, the music we choose to listen to. Like I go kind of everywhere. I let it float like into different things, which brings in almost like different energy wavelengths. Okay, so that's what's bringing in. Okay, now what am I putting out to clear it? That's like the process of it. So in this unconventional way of healing, as I, like my body and I kind of follow this, I am documenting and following a spiritual path. I just don't talk about it that way, because that's like the part, like, so I've always believed in a God, I get a higher power. I was raised Catholic, so that is like a whole different thing. I had to break free from what I, like, so on top of it, so you're abuse. Then you have the religion and a strict, like, I love my grandma to death, but very strict Catholic. And she was my best friend, but that's like, it was a whole other thing. And then also a European background, strict, very strict Catholic, right out of Poland. So it very strict beliefs in my family. Then add in, so when I was, but my first sexual abuse, I've been abused by both men and women in my life, but my first sexual abuse from my stepfather, so that's, it's like so many different, like different culture, different worlds, different things kind of colliding. And it's just been such a mess for me in trying to clean this up. And I say, where does that go back to? Okay, energies and healing chakras. So funny enough, right, how I've had to work through this and heal through this is going further into pain, into those monsters, into those things that become, and understanding that, like the forgiveness I've had to give and understand of, like my stepfather, for example. And that's a hard concept for a lot of people to get. He is dead. He killed himself when I was I want to believe, dates are tough for me because that's like, if I don't have something documented, but I believe around 12, 13, when finally it came out, like, because I had told the information, blah, 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 but then there was other things that was coming. He was supposed to appear in court. He was, I believe, abusing. He had already moved out of the house, was living with somebody else, and I believe was even abusing another girl at the time, another child. And then that came out, and then he killed himself. And it said in the report, I believed it to be on a heroin overdose. I don't remember him being a heroin addict. It could have been morphine, though. So these are the things that they get mixed up, and I'm not sure. And nor does it matter. But the point here is I had, because that was my first, I had to acknowledge my first sexual experience was that fucked up and bad, because the disconnect of the brain in my mind didn't understand that. I actually didn't understand that until, I didn't understand that until 2020. I started to get those flashbacks of memories of understanding that when I was going through a boxing fight and getting punched in the face and different things, which was true. But again, I didn't want anyone, I was a very proud person. I've always kept up this external shield, because then that comes from, I guess, too, like I said, my dad, this, like the business and the European type style stuff, get over it. I don't come from love, right? So, and everybody has different things, but it's like my dad's approach, even after with my abuse, is get over it, like get over it. So I didn't have that like compassionate man in my life. So it's, I look back and I go, that's what I had to be. That's almost became that. And then I literally exploded. And then I started taking, because these videos and stuff I started doing to myself bit by bit, here and there, a little bit in 2019, a little bit more and more talking, but in 2020, like everything, just so much stuff coming out. Then I posted it. At the time I posted it and did things I don't really remember, like I just did it. I was like, fuck it, I need to let this go. Well, that came with, let's go back, an energy, because you got, now all of a sudden everybody knows me to be this like right? A strong person or a people pleaser, or this thing that I've presented to the world, but I realized I hated so much of what people were taking from me, and that's where I snapped. And I put it out to the world. Well, guess what? There's a consequence to that, because people's perception, judgment, things is all on them, nothing to do with me, but that energy comes at you. And then the shift in the thing. So when I went to go get help, that's when I didn't realize, because I was far gone at the point too, in a sense, how bad the abuse was from this, what's supposed to be help. So when I went to a hospital, like I went to volunteer, somebody called, I don't know who, to put me in a hospital because I was out of character. However, at that time, would have argued I'm more manic, in a sense that I look back, like I had a different sense of humor, I was funny, or more whatever, but it was out of character for me, because it was things that were internalized that were finally a little bit more coming out. But I was also meaner, almost like a dementia person, meaner. But it was because it was more honest, because those are the things that are at the core. I'm like, actually, now I'm seeing these people for who they are. Now I'm giving it back to you. Like, I've been kind of taking all this in, right? It's like, what's your internal dialogue and what's your external dialogue? And then when that doesn't match, a lot of people are very uncomfortable with it. And then I went to go get help, and that's when I said they lied and misdocumented information. That's why I have a real lack of trust, and that's why I, funny enough, had to do this way, because the system, right? And I'm not going to get, there's other stuff in that, but for me, for my story and why I've like kind of discovered this process was because of how unjust the doctors and the system is, and where that ties to the finance industry, which I can't get into those details this way, but it because it has to do with other things. But I just, and so lying on my dog, like mistreatment, all these things, but because I still was so unwell from so much other abuse, like layers and layers and layers, but I was getting my memories back, it messed me up. And I say this going back to the chakras, going back to the energies, because I had put out a different energy to a public that wasn't there. Now, okay, now all of a sudden all these people, what's going on, and getting in the way with their perceptions and their things, versus actually helping. And the lack of understanding of a person is where somebody can go like completely insane. And that's why not feeling understood, not being properly supported, not being properly helped is where this what sends somebody into suicide, like suicidal thoughts, right? So that's where and that goes back to, okay, like healing like all of the chakras, and that's the energy in and energy out. So where I realized kind of for myself in the process in 20, I'm like, okay, I need to take my body back for myself to heal, because all of this sexual trauma, like the energies that have come at me, make me feel uncomfortable. So that's why, funny enough, I do these videos in my underwear, in my thing, for me, in those ways, but nobody's allowed to touch me in my space or whatever it is, because I've become so protective of that, because it was taken from me. But the irony is the thoughts still have bothered me, and the perceptions, because so if I and this is the thing that goes back to after, so I became a professional fitness model. Most of my fitness stuff, I did shoots in like lingerie and stuff, professional, classy, but there's still the judgments of the world, and the perception is other people's, but it would still fuck with my head. And then I started doing more, getting on, like when I was more cut. So right now, my weight, I'm at, said on the thing, and said everybody's different. Like I'm obsessed, obviously, with the perfection of bodies for myself. I recognize I have an issue because it ties to my self-worth, which I'm fixing. That's the process. But where my weight was when I'm like, so it's almost like I'm like, oh, I like my body. I felt better in like whatever, lingerie, different things. Okay, now I feel a little more confident. I'm going to post it, different energies, to a specific audience that people know me different. Well, that came with another set of energies. Then you have these things and the hate, both sides. So you get sexual energy that comes at you, which made me feel very uncomfortable. Then a hate, then a thing, because you can't control other people, right? The message, the things. You can't on a bigger platform, on a platform where people know you and stuff, like a thing. That would actually make me crash. So this was like high, low, high, low, high, low, high, low. So I played with that in the last 2 years, recognizing when my energies change and shift and whatever else. And that has to go back, I said, to clearing the different types of chakras. How does my heart feel? How does my head feel? How do I feel at these different times? What's going through my body? Where are the thoughts? Where does that go? And I had to realize you have to go further into the worst case scenarios of your life and repeat them and change them. The things you don't, that's, you have to, and that's where we get uncomfortable with stuff when it triggers something that was traumatic. And I said, everybody has a different degree of what was traumatic for them. A lot of people that have issues with eating disorders, emotional eating, any of those things, it has to do with some generally, a lot of the time somebody had some sort of sexual trauma. That's a big thing for eating disorders, whether people recognize it or not, and they might not remember. Like, I know there's, like, so for me, I was abused over and over and over again, multiple people all the time, like, for my life. But a lot of people, you know, could have been one fucking experience, right, at a babysitter's, and that they don't remember. It could have been one, like, it could have been as a baby, something happened. Could have been as, right? So I don't want to minimize anybody's kind of thing. And just like flip side for me, I've had other blessings. There's people who have been, right, in prostitution, sex trafficking in other countries, right? And then that's more, so that's why I say my issue was always minimizing my abuse, because I was comparing myself to, well, I'm not being sex trafficked and I'm not living in whatever, the Philippines, right? So that's where I would get my head, and then I go, who am I to complain? That doesn't work either, right? Because then you're not healing. And that's also why I'm so empathetic in doing these things, is because people not recognizing where that comes from, because that type of energy, then you have a sexual confusion, right, is going to be all over the place. So that's why so many people can be unsure about their bodies. Okay, well, add in, so that's the trauma point, but one in 3 children are molested. That's a major problem. 1 in 3. It's that bad. So if you don't recognize or know that, you're already, like, understand, like, you've been a side of the privilege. And if you haven't been abused, you better become a person who's more empathetic. Because if you're having issues with your weight or your things or different things too, you might fall into a different category of, you know, having controlled, you know, you could have grown up in the good household, but maybe there's a lot of control in other ways for status, for things on whatever else. Oh, you got to look like, I know a lot, you know, people that weren't abused, but they, you know, the mom, dad, whatever, it like put them in, like, whatever, competitive gymnastics at a young age or something, and you have to, in that, you got to be this weight, you got to be this weight, you got to be these things. And then the added control from that, because of that, maybe the parent was, funny enough, was abused, and then they become so controlling to their child because of the insecurities they have with something else. These are how these things are passed on. So you have to recognize that. So you have to recognize where your things come from when you feel uncomfortable, when you're having an issue, right? I feel very out of sorts with my body in this process and talking to it. Some days I'm good, some days I'm bad, some mornings I'm good, some, like, it can shift around. Sometimes I feel, right? I have a major issue with, I look at it said, what I focus on is the wrong things. Like, I'm so picky on just even this, hanging over like this. My internal dialogue as I'm talking is focused on this and feeling like I'm too fat. That's an eating disorder. Or, sorry, not an eating disorder, just a disorder with where my attention is going. That's the problem. And the irony is, when you're in that position, when you're eating better, when you're doing whatever, let's say, or you're trying to, like, switch things, if you're focused on the negative, that's actually what's going to multiply. That's what's going to multiply. So it's like, you got to clear that out and focus on it. So, and I wasn't, before I started talking about, and it wasn't until, so this process, that I cared or noticed my body again. I was good with, funny enough, when I stopped giving a shit and I was only worrying about my business, that's when my body and all that was its best. I was, like, not worried about it. I was doing mental, and it was at its best. I was like, oh, I'm clear, I'm good, I'm focused on other things. Soon as it came back around, I had an opportunity which I kind of squashed right now until it's kind of coming back for a different reason, was focused on my appearance, it made me crash. And that I realized that goes back to the energy and the different things, because where the focus goes, then it felt like, and whether it was or not, small platforms, big platforms, people watching, not people, I went, holy shit, like, when am I comfortable putting something out there? To who, where do I feel safe? And because at my core, I don't feel safe anywhere. But you have to be safe with yourself first. And I'm not there yet. That's why I'm having a hard time. Because I've had, in doing that, so much come at me that's fucked up my head. Because and I needed help. I needed help from doctors to sort that out, because my abuse was so bad, and instead I was further abused. So I don't trust anyone at this point right now in my life. And I'm learning how to trust myself. And that's the hardest part, because when you've been pulled in so many directions and taught you're not worthy, you don't trust yourself. And that's the core of everything. So if you can't be in the kitchen and you're, and be around food that is triggering and it not be an issue, is because you don't trust yourself. There's something, okay, there's a trigger there. There's something. If you've been it's the same principle applies. Like I've never had an issue with drugs. So if drugs were sitting in front of me, I wouldn't crave it. I've had alcohol in my cupboard. I've never had an issue with alcohol. So I can have it around. It wouldn't do anything for me, right? That's my brain. Somebody else's brain would have a hard time. So mine happens to be food, right? So I work through those things. Somebody else would, that's where you have to go, okay, why am I being triggered this way when blah, 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 blah. It has to do with not trusting yourself. And then you have to ask yourself, why don't I trust myself? Why? Because it brings up, and then you need to figure out that core of what it brings up. And then you have to understand the energies and releasing all of those things. And that goes back, and the core of so much of it, when it has to, and then it goes back, like our root chakras are different things of every part of the body that needs to be released. That's what I'm trying to work through. But that also, so this part of the healing, it gets worse before it gets better, because you're bringing out things and talking about things that have never been discussed. Talking to my phone has been more freeing because I have to be more honest. Talking to a therapist, generally what happens? You filter yourself. You're triggered by the way the therapist is and the judgments. And because I'm so angry in my life, I'm not saying there isn't therapists and doctors in the world. I have to have faith that there is, that somebody would know what they're doing. But at this point in my life, not one fucking therapist, doctor, person, nothing has done their job that I would trust. Not one. The evidence, I have to, when I come into real reality of my life, have only ever caused damage. So that has caused a problem, because I have a disconnect of going, how in the hell am I supposed, when you've been so damaged, to get yourself repaired that you could trust yourself. Then that's why I'm like, okay, I have to document this process to create it, to help people. And I say I'm a guide, not a coach, not a therapist, to help other people dig down and do the same so they can trust themselves to make the right decisions. But what do I want to do? Not put somebody through the same process that I went through for so many years of wandering around lost, alone, going, here, this is what to expect, this is what's going to happen, here's how to work through it, here's how you, and then there's a guide. Because as of right now, in the whole fucking system globally, I would say it's a failure if I can't find one fucking doctor or one fucking therapist that actually can do their job. Guess I'm angry today.